Our first speaker is Anna Kerr. Anna lives and works on the land of the Gadigal and Wangal Peoples of the Eora Nation, whose way of life has been devastated by colonisation. Anna is a founder and the principal solicitor of Feminist Legal Clinic, and her legal practice is equally split between domestic violence and discrimination cases. In recent years, Anna has also held a variety of other positions, including co-chair of the Women and Girls' Rights Subcommittee of Australian Lawyers for Human Rights, elected member of the steering group of the Equality Rights Alliance, committee member of the Edna Ryan Committee, member of the New South Wales Women's Electoral Lobby Pro-Choice Alliance, and member of the New South Wales Greens Women's Working Group. In all these positions, she has experienced aggressive moves to oust her as a result of her efforts to defend women's sex-based rights. She will talk tonight about her latest experience with being cancelled by misguided forces for progress. So Anna, can I ask you to say a little introduction and give us some details of your involvement in advocating for women's sex-based rights? Thanks.
Well, my background is obviously as a solicitor. I was admitted in 1992, so I've been practicing as a solicitor for almost 30 years. And throughout my career, I've worked almost entirely in the community justice sector, beginning with the Aboriginal Legal Service, and my last paid employment was with Women's Legal Services. So that's given me detailed knowledge of the deficiencies in the Australian legal system, which often leave women and children exposed to male violence and abuse. So in 2017, with a group of other women, I incorporated Feminist Legal Clinic, and we then applied for an accommodation grant from the City of Sydney Council, which enabled us to set up an office in Glebe. And I operate this service with the assistance of many volunteer women, including Janet, for instance, who's a current member of our management committee, and Bronwyn has been a member in the past, and many other women, no doubt, who are attending tonight. About half our casework relates to domestic violence work, which I include under that support work in the family court, and the other half is sort of discrimination and human rights law. So that's my background.
Anna, what made you first realise transgenderism as a threat to women's rights?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a gradual awakening, to be honest. At first I thought, like many women, that it was a minor concern, since I assumed there were so few of these marginalised individuals and that they were much to be pitied, and it really wasn't something we should give a lot of attention to. But then I became active. I was focusing my attentions on activism in the women's sector. And so in about 2013, I joined a community organisation, a women's organisation. I'm trying not to mention the names. A lot of you will know which organisation I mean. But anyhow, there were attempts to amend the constitution to read people who live as women rather than simply women. And there was a bit of a showdown over that. So then I started realising that it was serious. I'm also a member of a political party, and I was quite astounded that during a discussion about the decriminalisation of abortion, that someone claimed the language was transphobic because men have babies too. And I thought that was pretty bizarre. And most concern was that it derailed the discussion. But even more bizarre were the apologies that followed. And that was when I realised that this was a seriously effective means of dismantling feminist activism. I was even more appalled when the women's working group that I was on they then voted in a person with a penis to be their convener and showered him with praise for his courage, even though he was maintaining his male persona for business purposes. Basically, every time I think there is something that no one could take seriously, I've been shown to be wrong. And to that extent, my expectations of human intelligence have significantly lowered. And really, I think like everyone, we keep wondering, when will peak trans hit? Will it be the weightlifter, Laurel Hubbard? What will it take? And I think we're still wondering what it will take before the world turns around on this.
Is there an area of activity in which you focus your efforts to resist gender identity ideology? Where has that taken you?
Well, it's taken me I was going to say destitution. No, it hasn't. I mean, it's just resulted in me being evicted from my office and being defamed and marginalised within my sector. So I'm probably unemployable. But no, it's actually been an enjoyable ride. I mean, I focus my efforts on providing legal services and law reform activities, including international human rights work. I enjoy doing this work. I think this is an extraordinarily fascinating issue. If you put aside how potentially devastating it is for humanity. If people would like to know more about what we do, you can check out Feminist Legal Clinic's website, because we've got all our submissions and articles and presentations up there. We've also have a news blog, and we post extracts from news reports that you might not otherwise see, because the Australian media, of course, is largely censoring what's taking place in regard to this issue. So yeah, that's where I've been focusing my efforts. And yes, you might have seen that where it's taken me is that just recently the City of Sydney have given us a notice to vacate.
Can you tell us a little about the opposition you've met and how this is impacting you personally?
Yeah, you ran through a bit of it in the introduction. I think I gave you a big list of all these positions that I've held on bodies, such as co-chair of the Women and Girls' Rights Subcommittee of Australian Lawyers for Human Rights, and steering group of Equality Rights Alliance, Edna Ryan Committee, New South Wales Women's Electoral Lobby, and various. And of course, all of these groups have taken aggressive action to have me kicked out. Sometimes even when I haven't even mentioned the subject, because someone saw my website. And of course, the latest action is by the City of Sydney Council. Look, it's probably not as devastating as some of the earlier experiences, because I've actually received a lot of expressions of support from people in the last few weeks, despite some of the media coverage not being terribly flattering. I've been surprised that I haven't received any abuse, knock wood, and I've received a lot of donations and a lot of expressions of support from all sorts of people, from a very wide range of people. Some of them I don't have politically much in common with, others, of course, I do. Look, I was expecting it. We had a year's notice that they were going to kick us out, and I made a calculated judgment that it was well worth losing our office to finally receive some media coverage of the fact that there are feminist women who do not support extreme trans activism. I'm very frustrated that we still can't crack. I mean, the Herald has run one article on page 8, which was not very flattering, but at least it was something, because the Herald really, there's just so much censorship taking place, unless it's the far right media, who of course are only too happy to run a story detracting from Clover Moore. But really, like the ABC and the Herald and the Age, they just won't touch this topic if they can avoid it. But look, I had no intention of really giving into this kind of bullying, because the work that I'm doing it unpaid. Why on earth would I be dictated to about what sort of work I can do? Fortuitously, my eldest son has moved out of home, and I've been able to fit the filing cabinets into his bedroom, and working from home is basically mandatory at the moment, pretty much, with the lockdown in Sydney. So, it's really not a big deal for me. And as I say, this time round, I've probably had more support than I did with all those earlier battles that I mentioned, which some of them were very distressing.
What are your next steps for the Feminist Legal Clinic in exile? And what do you think attendees could be doing?
Look, there was a wonderful recent victory in New Zealand, and a lot of people are saying, well, are you going to do a judicial review? It would mean of the decision by the City of Sydney Council is what I'm referring to here. However, the legal issues are somewhat different, and even if we were to win, it would be a bit futile, since our tenancy expires next year anyhow, and I don't believe we'd be able to legally compel council to renew our accommodation grant. And furthermore, there'd be a risk of incurring a huge costs order against us. And it would also take a lot of time and resources. And frankly, we've got other better cases on which we could expend our efforts. I have had legal advice from a number of barristers on this, and I'll be speaking to another one next week. But look, regardless of that, I have plans to agitate over this issue further. I mean, I think the most important thing is the media coverage. So really, in a sense, any sort of legal action is so that you get a bit of coverage. Trying to get the media to report on this, to report that there are feminists and lesbian women and left-wing people who are not happy about it. I think that's actually the priority. Other things that I'm doing, for instance, today I've sent a letter to UN Women for the Commission on the Status of Women. So I've sent them a letter about the violation. I've sent them a number of letters actually, but I've sent one specifically about the violation of our rights to freedom of speech as human rights defenders. And I've got some other legal plans. You know, I'm going to do a GIPA request, which is like freedom of information, to obtain now as many details as I can about the nature of these complaints. I'd like to verify how many complainants there were. I imagine they won't give me the details, but they won't give me the names, I don't imagine. I'll try, but I'd just like to know how many there really were, because there were hundreds of women, thanks to the Women's Human Rights Campaign, the international group, which I'd really want to say. I mean, they did a letter that's had over 900 signatures that was sent to council. And then dozens and dozens of women locally as well have handwritten letters, you know, written personal letters to members of council, the staff and councillors. I want to thank everyone who did that, but it was completely ignored by council. So I'd really like to see what we were up against on the other side, because they've never provided any details of the complaints that were actually made. Like, they haven't given me a copy with redacted details or anything like that. It's just been, there have been complaints. So yeah, I'll keep plugging on and thank everyone for the support and ongoing support that they've been giving through social media and by writing to council.